Hey guys, and welcome to another exciting episode of Looks and Wisdom Sundays with me, Aluchi, aka the Elusive Pundit. And this week we are finding wisdom from Goddess Sekhmet. This month, because it's Women's Month, International Women's Month, I decided to find wisdom from the goddesses. And this week we're finding wisdom from Goddess Sekhmet, who is the daughter of Ra, the sun god, and she was brought about as the Eye of Ra congregation to bring about God's vengeful manifestation. And to put in layman terms, so she was here to make sure that the mortals who were not following God's line were actually brought into account. She did this by a multitude of things. Her breath was a breath of fire, so she could destroy things. Plagues were one of her favorite ways in which to bring about this vengeful wrath of God. And so she was a warrior goddess, and her job was to make sure that the mortals stay in line, and then after that pack her bags and go back to the sun. And so she came and then she did that, and she was very close to destroying humanity, and she still was not satisfied with the work that she had done. And so the ego then started to chip into her, where she wanted to be this overpowering warrior goddess, where she literally could smell blood from everywhere and she wanted to destroy everything. And in that case, that was not acceptable because that was above and beyond what she was sent here to do. And then God Ra noticed this and was like, Goddess Sekhmet is going in the wrong direction. What are we going to do about that? And so he decided that he was going to pour down beer that looked like blood as to confuse Goddess Sekhmet. And so she drank that, and then she got drunk, and then it loosened her inhibitions like alcohol does to all of us. And so she came down, and apparently she went back to God Ra on her own accord. In the second instance of the legend is the fact that she got so egotistical that she wanted to diminish the power of the sun. And in that case, God Ra, the sun god, was like, no, Sekhmet, you can't do that. Come here. So he fetched Sekhmet back to the sun. So as last week we spoke about the Mother Supreme Goddess Nanaburuku, and the fact that her part of the human evolution was to give birth to the moon and the sun and then go back to where she came from. She did that without any qualms. In the case of Sekhmet, she let the ego get in the way, which is what happens to a lot of us sometimes, where you know your intention, you know where it's supposed to end, but because you become power hungry about things, you're obsessive about things, you don't know that you've won already and that it's time for you to move on, which was the case of Sekhmet, not knowing when to stop. She had already won. She was like close to destroying the earth, which was more than she was asked for, and still it wasn't enough for her. She wanted to do more, and then there had to be outside intervention in the form of God Ra turning bring about wine, well, with beer. I wonder why it was beer, and he turned it red. He could have just gotten red wine. I'm just saying, maybe the beer was Sekhmet's drink of choice. And in the second instance, where he literally came back here to be like, Sekhmet, you need to go. And sometimes we need to be careful when the ego is at play in places where we have done and completed, and just knowing the when to stop. Knowing when to stop is very important. When knowing when to leave friendships, knowing when to leave relationships, knowing when to leave a job, knowing when to move, knowing when to. Sometimes the ego plays a role. Oh, I've been here for like 7 years, why would I go? Or I'm owed that. I was raising him since he was a baby, so I'm owed that. A lot of us stay in situations because we feel like we owed, but we don't want to end up like Sekhmet, where we have to have outside intervention pulling us out of our own ego and our own self-destruction and our own self-doing. And I think that's what I wanted to say. Know when to stop, basically. And I think Sekhmet still did a great job as God's vengeful manifestation. We still know her as the warrior goddess who destroys things. And we also learn from her that it's important to know when to stop, to know when the task is completed, and to move on. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope to see you guys next week when we are profiling my favorite goddess, Buster. How you doing? Thank you guys. See you next week.
Thank you for joining. See you next week with another episode of Looks and Wisdom with Oluchi.